Hello everyone and welcome back to my channel. It's Rachel Ray here, and today we have another drill with me where I'm going to be working on my Treasure Studios art canvas called Halloween Secrets, and I will be sharing with you some mythological creatures from Ireland and a few stories associated with those creatures. So if you're interested in hearing about all of these things, please stay tuned. If you're new here, please subscribe, like this video, and I will see you all in just a moment. Let's begin. Hello and good evening to everyone watching this video. Tonight I'm going to be doing a voiceover, which is a little bit different for this kind of a video. While I am working on the collaboration piece between Diamond Art Addiction and I that was very kindly given to me by Treasure Studios Art, I'm going to be in this particular video talking about Irish mythology and creatures associated with the supernatural. I thought it was pretty fitting considering that this is a Halloween collaboration, and Samhain is a very important festival in ancient Irish culture and some modern Irish culture as well. So I hope you enjoy this video. This is a time lapse of me working on this painting, and at the time of recording this voiceover, I'm not 100% sure how fast the video is going, but I will talk as long as I can. I hope you enjoy it. Before we get into the creatures and the mythology, which I have spent quite some time researching, so I hope you enjoy, I do encourage you to go and look at the pictures of these creatures and also to maybe expand your horizons and look into the history and culture of what Halloween was and is today in different countries. It's very, very interesting. And to be honest, it was a bit of a rabbit hole for me. So before we do get started, I'm just going to mention a few things. First, this diamond painting does come from the website treasurestudiosart.com. I have the link for this painting in the description box of the video down below. And if you just press the arrow button, you'll see all the links to everything I'm about to mention. If you decide that you would like to purchase this painting, it is available. It's available for a limited time, so it'll be available until both Cherri and I finish our Treasure Studios art paintings for Halloween, which, to be honest, at this rate, it's probably going to take us both a while, considering I've only scratched the surface of it, and I've had it for three weeks, I think. And I have been working diligently, but this painting has a lot of confetti. So for all of you confetti lovers out there, this painting is the one for you. Seriously. There have been only a few places where I've been able to use a multi-placer, which I'm doing right now in the video, but probably not for you. I'm going to speed it up a little bit, but it is a wonderful painting to work on. The symbols, I am using a light pad in this video because it is late at night when I'm recording this video, and my eyes get very tired at the end of the day. So I do recommend a light pad if you also have that trouble. I prefer to diamond paint during the day, but I find that I only really have time at night. So that is why the lighting is a little bit harsh in this video, and I do apologize if that hurts your eyes. If it does hurt your eyes, I would encourage you to feel free to just listen along to this video, as you could be working on your own work in progress while I'm talking. So the link to this painting is in the description. This is a 70 by 80 centimeter. It's a biggin. It's called Halloween Secrets. And if you want, I have Cherri's referral link down below as well. You can use that to get into the website, and it will give you, which is also in the description of the video. So please, if you would like to purchase the painting, go ahead and check it out. like I said, limited to time, but the time isn't that limited at this stage. It'll be a bit more imminent at the end, but we've got a while to go. Just so you know, these videos, we will continue to make videos about Halloween and things up until that time. And after that, I will be working on this painting quite a bit still. I will finish it, and I will be making, whip and chats with this video. I might do a different type of video with this canvas as well, but I will continue to work on it, and it will be on my channel for as long as it's being worked up. So if you have any questions about any of that, please leave them down in the comment section of this video. And without any further ado, let us get into the mythological creatures. So the first creature, which you may have already heard of before, is a banshee. Now, banshees, if you don't know, she means fairy in Irish. And a banshee is like a fairy that looks like an older woman. And you've probably seen banshees in movies or in stories before. You don't always see them, but you hear them because they have the most just blood-curdling scream and wail. So what would happen is typically banshees would roam around the fields of rich people and certain families, probably around rich people, because rich people write the stories, right? But when someone was about to die, she would go near the house and scream. And basically it could be what people heard in their head when someone was dying. That takes the fun out of it, doesn't it? It says here that she's the harbinger of sudden, unexpected death, and on the rare occasions when she was spotted, written accounts have stated that her eyes were red from crying and she'd wring her hands as she wailed, sometimes seen brushing her hair, her long silver hair, with a comb. So anyone who picked an abandoned comb off the ground was sure to be taken by the fairies, of course. So don't pick up a stray comb off the ground. She doesn't seem to cause any direct harm. So she's just a spirit. She's only, a fairy that cannot touch you. And it scares people to hear her cry. It says here, cynics and realists have attributed this story to vixens calling in the night. If you've ever heard the noise, it does sound remarkably similar to a woman screeching. So there are many, many stories about banshees. Banshees have been in video games and movies and pop culture for a long time after the folklore and the oral tradition of talking about fairies has probably more or less toned down in recent years. So this is all really interesting information, so I'm going to keep going. It says here that the banshee comes in 3 possible guises depending on who you talk to or where the stories come from. And that seems to be a running theme. Banshees and other creatures all take on slightly different forms in different parts of the country. And this is Ireland that we're talking about again. So more often than not, she is depicted as a crouching hag. I hate that word, but hag, with a horrible wrinkly face, although in other stories she's a beautiful, ethereal young woman or a stately matron type. In yet more stories, she's referred to as the ghost of a murdered woman or a woman who died in childbirth. The 3 typical guises of the banshee may represent the 3 aspects of the Celtic goddesses of war and death, which I'm going to attempt to pronounce Bave, Macha, and Morrogan, I think. I apologize if I messed that up. Anyway, the goddesses of war and death. In almost all cases, the Banshee have long silver hair, and she's sometimes seen brushing it with a comb. And again, that's why people would never pick up a comb lying on the ground for fear of being taken away by the fairies. She wears a gray hooded cloak or the white sheet or maybe even a grave robe of the dead, and her eyes are red from crying. Many believe that she can, in fact, take on any of the above forms and change from one to the other as she pleases. Her cry seems to be the subject of much debate. In Leinster, it says that her cry is so shrill that it can shatter glass. More northerly in Tyrone, she sounds like two boards being struck together, which I'm trying to picture now, but I guess a kind of slapping sound, a very crackling slap. But in Kerry, her call is a low, pleasant singing, which I find very interesting. That sounds more like a siren to me. Whatever she sounds like, it says everyone agrees she can be heard from a great distance, and some report that she cries several nights in a row before death occurs, while others say it just happens the one time on the night of the person's death. Her cry, that's my dog, by the way, sorry, she's just trying to get attention from me. Her cry rises and falls and lasts for at least a few minutes, verifying in intensity. There have been alleged incidents where the Banshee cried for a person who was in perfect health, but then found dead within a week of some freak accident. The majority of a Banshee's visits are paid at night, with a few, just a small few, taking place around noon. Banshees are usually thought to have once been a normal woman who enjoyed her life, was incredibly beautiful, and radiated happiness. But some great sorrow overcame her at some point, and she became a haggard old woman. She was seemingly very weary of mortals and would disappear at the first sign of any human activity. In fact, she didn't seem to enjoy the company of anyone, mortal or not, and traveled as a solitary fairy, which I will talk about again when we move on to another creature later on. When banshees move from place to place, witnesses have heard a fluttering sound similar to birds flying. Luna, thank you. Sorry, guys. When she disappeared, all that would be left behind was a cloud of mist. There are several purported banshee chairs around Ireland. Ooh, I didn't know that. Wedge-shaped rocks where she would sit and cry for great misfortune. If there was no death to be attended to, that is. When a family emigrated, legend has it that Banshee would follow, or if she didn't, she'd stay at the family seat and lament their leaving there. If I haven't said it before, I'm going to say it now. My Irish pronunciation is horrible at best, so I apologize to anyone listening who actually does speak Irish, like Pippa and Aisling. So I apologize in advance to everyone. My pronunciation is not true to reality, but I will do my best. I am practicing. So I have a few little bits and pieces here about banshees. So it says here that while banshees don't harm people that she encounters, there's another Irish female spirit who isn't as benign. The Banshee is a beautiful woman who attracts men, and W.B. Yeats described her in The Fairy and Folklore of the Irish Peasantry, which is an excellent book. You should probably check it out if you are interested in these stories. Absolutely 100%, please check it out. W.B. Yeats. He wrote, "The Banshee, or fairy mistress, seeks the love of mortals. If they refuse, she must be their slave. If they consent, they are hers, and can only escape by finding another to take their place. The fairy lives on their life, and they waste away. Death is no escape from her. She is the Gaelic muse, for she gives inspiration to those she persecutes. The Gaelic poets die young, for she is restless, and will not let them remain long on earth, this malignant phantom. So maybe W.B. Yeats was in love with a fairy mistress himself. It says here that the origins of the Banshee are pretty ordinary compared to other mythological creatures in Ireland. In medieval times, during funerals, a woman would take on the role of a keener. A keener is a woman who sings sad songs or cries at the graveside. And in many, many, many cultures, still to this day, keeners are important. They're crucial to a funeral. So you would pay quite a lot of money to get a really good keener at a funeral. And basically, if the idea is that the more people mourn at a funeral, the greater that person was in their life. So you could pay people to believe that you were a great person before you died. Anyway, for the most powerful families, it was a common belief that a Banshee, or a fairy woman, would come to keen at the grave. Fairies presumably were more talented singers than any other human, naturally. And so the Irish phrase became anglicized eventually to Banshee instead of Banshee. I believe that's how you're pronouncing it. And over time, the stories developed and morphed into what we know today. The fact that the keeners were paid in alcohol and often ended up as elderly alcoholic women that were banished from towns and villages also adds to that myth. Probably why they're old women. The first known written record of a Banshee story is Sean McCraw's, I cannot read this correctly, Caharim Tohar del Biog. I probably pronounced that totally wrong. Triumphs of Turlough. Oh, right, Turlough. Okay, it's got a lot of vowels. That's one thing about Irish that I just yeah. So as we said, the Banshee originally appeared to people who were thought to, or they were about to suffer a really violent and painful sudden death, like murder. And in later stories, she wailed outside their door at night, usually around forested areas, but she was very rarely seen. So cynics and realists say that it's nothing but an old wives' tale, say that the wails are just owls or vixens, female foxes, which I have heard, and it is scary. It is really, really scary. It sounds like a baby screaming. Yeah, foxes screaming at night. I literally walked outside one night because I heard what sounded like a child screaming. And I was like, there are no children that live near my house. And so I opened the front door, and even the dog perked up a bit. And I was just standing there at the door, listening, going, is there a child in the field? And then it just clicked, and I realized that it was a fox. It says here, actually, if you've ever heard either animal, they actually sound remarkably similar to a woman screeching or a child. The Banshee was usually described, we said already, as an ugly elderly woman dressed in white or gray with long silver hair, and occasionally took the form of a crow, stoat, hare, or weasel, typically animals associated with witchcraft in Ireland. So I'm sure that there's all sorts of references there to witchcraft as well. And maybe Cherri could weigh in on that. So it's saying that Banshees, again, they're relatively harmless. Nothing really happens when she cries other than, the death of a person. But it wasn't her that caused the death. She was just kind of the messenger, so to speak. There is a legend that her sister spirit, who was a Lianhan, didn't I say it was a Lianhan? She, sweetheart fairy is what it's saying here, was somewhat more malicious actually. Because she sought the love of mortal men, and their desire was so intense for her that they were driven to madness and destroyed. That makes her a little bit more dangerous. So guys, if you're listening, just be wary of the Banshee. There's also a similar manifestation of the Banshee known as the washing woman, the I'm trying to pronounce it, Beania. I'm not pronouncing that right. I'm so sorry. But that's more of a Scottish story than an Irish story. It says here, instead of wailing and crying at night to warn someone of a death, she would instead wash the bloody clothes of the person about to meet their doom in a local water source. That's really weird. Her appearance was generally thought to be the same, but she was sometimes washing her own bloody clothes instead of someone else's. Very interesting. So that is the Banshee. I have here a famous story. In 1801, the Banshee paid a visit to the commander-in-chief of the British forces in Ireland. He had attended a party at Dublin Castle and invited a few guests back to his home in Mount Kennedy, County Wicklow after. These guests, Sir Jonah Barrington and his wife, woke up at 2:30 a.m. to what he described as plaintive sounds coming from outside his window. His wife and a maid were also awoken by it, and the sound later turned out to be the Rossmore being, screeching 3 times. The next morning, they were told that a servant, having heard odd sounds from Rossmore's room at 2:30 a.m., entered to find him dying. So, was it a coincidence? Who knows? Anyhow, there's lots and lots of stories about banshees. Let's move on to the next being here, which I have. The next one that I'd like to talk about is called the Pooka. Pooka are actually really interesting, and they are in almost every culture I could ever think of. These Pooka means ghost in Irish. And funny story, over the weekend, not this past weekend, but the weekend before, I went on my first ever falconry trip with my friends, Jesse and Adam. It's very interesting having hawks and owls fly at you, and I thought that I'd be more scared than I was, but I will attempt to add some video here if you want to have a look at it, and some pictures. The picture I want to show you first, though, is Pooka. Pooka was a juvenile, or is a juvenile barn owl. Barn owls don't get much bigger than Pooka. So it was very, very sweet watching Pooka dance around, and she even climbed up on my shoulder, which was really cute, and I kind of wish that she had stayed there a little bit longer. I don't seem to have a fear of these animals, but if I had seen them in the great outdoors, I think I would actually be afraid. So anyhow, Pooka. Pooka is primarily a creature of Celtic folklore, but they have been seen in other cultures like in Welsh and Cornish, French, and many other places. I believe in Poland as well. Pooka were said to be fairies who lived near ancient stones or in very magical areas. They are supposedly bringers of either good or bad fortune. It depends on where they are, where you are when you're listening to the stories. They can shapeshift, so they can take on forms of different animals. And you may know Pooka, the name Pooka, from a very popular movie, Anastasia. Anastasia's dog in the animated film Anastasia from the early 2000s, I believe, or late 90s. There was a little dog named Pooka, and it was the cutest thing ever. So, they can also take a human form, but the human form would have ears or a tail or something animalistic in it. So, here we have some etymology. The origin of the name could have come from the Old Norse term Puk or Pooki, which refers to nature spirit. Usage of the term in Ireland predates that of Norse settlers, so that's a very interesting... That's my dog. Excuse her. It could have predated. It predates Norse. So the interesting thing is that they both relate to each other, and I love history and making connections in that way. So anyhow, the name of Pooka could have also come from the Irish word pook or puck. I think it's puck actually. Puck means goat, male goat. So in ancient times, or not even in ancient times, in relatively early times, farmers were mostly concerned with harvest, right? So most people were concerned with harvest because it was the only way that they could possibly survive. And so most of these creatures and mythological figures, they have a lot to do with harvest time or sowing seeds. You know, it was very, very important at that time. Now that we have a more globalized world and you can import your red peppers from Holland, it doesn't really have the same meaning or the same impact on your daily life. But back then, it certainly would have. So if you can, for a few minutes, imagine that you are living in, say, the 1400s, 1500s, up until the last century, we've had a very, very good life in comparison to our ancestors. But anyway, speaking of Pooka, in midsummer, when the crops were all in bloom, all farmers could do was hope that crops would make it to harvest time. And the Pooka, who decide whether crops would be bountiful or if they would be blasted by fairies. So they are mainly associated with the rural communities and fishing folk. They're more apt to be found near ancient grounds like standing stones or areas where people were long dead. It says here that if you see the Pooka, it would raise concern in the community because the Pooka would ruin harvests. So the anxiety around reaping crops and seeing the Pooka engendered most of the deference against them. So after the crops were brought in during the harvest festival, which would be around now, right now, anything inedible remaining in the fields was considered to be tainted by the Pooka. So like blackberries or things like that, you wouldn't want to eat them after harvest time. It says here, it was well known as fairy blasted and inedible. Probably more like it was probably being eaten by bugs. And there could be worms in it and it could cause you severe diarrhea. So that's the more cynical, realistic look at it. But it says here that to counteract the fairy blasting of the crops, many farmers would leave a small portion of that edible crop for the Pooka during the harvest to keep goodwill going so that they wouldn't destroy the crops. In fact, it says here November 1st is Pooka Day, the one day that people know that the Pooka will behave in a civil manner, which is really interesting to me because that's the day after Samhain. So the day after the Day of the Dead is Pooka Day, and you know that they're all going to behave themselves and they're not going to cause you any trouble. Probably also because Samhain is the day where you would celebrate the harvest. It's basically the ancient Celtic version of Thanksgiving. I was going to say Halloween, duh. So it says here, throughout history, Irish people have been somewhat afraid of their local Pooka, and humans did their best to not upset them because a mad one is the last thing you need. There are a few accounts of older people saying that the Pooka used to be everywhere and they were wicked-minded and black-looking. I asked James, and he said that while he's not very familiar with Irish mythology, I mean, are you familiar with your local mythology? Probably not. He does remember people talking about wild black horses. Black horses are not very common. And so just like a white horse is not very common, a black horse is not either. If you saw a wild black horse, black goat, rabbit, or another black furred animal with golden eyes, then you would know that it was a Pooka. So there were many stories, he said, of black horses, but he doesn't remember them to be able to tell them. It says here that the Pooka appear most frequently on Samhain, specifically to befoul those blackberries that I said I was talking about. It is the time of the year where the berries are pretty much done, and that is so true. We have not actually been able to harvest any blackberries this year. The growing season for the blackberry was incredibly bad this year, which is not a good sign. We're probably in for a very cold winter. So, it says here that if a person meets a Pooka on their travels, they will try to entice the human onto its back. If this happens to you, you should accept. You would get one wild ride. The agreement of accepting the ride from the Pooka comes with the clause that the Pooka will not harm the human on the wild ride. And the most famous of these is Brian Boru. Brian Boru was a high king of ancient Ireland, and it said that he successfully rode them. It says he managed to do it by making a bridle, which incorporated some of the Pooka's tail hair, and it confused him and tamed him somewhat. So make sure that you rip out some of its hair and use it as a bridle. It also says here that on rare occasions, the Pooka is said to have the power of human speech. They use words when they need to lead a human away from harm. That's why humans were so afraid of Pooka. They could bring terrible misfortune, or they could save your life. When you met them, you weren't really sure which twist of fate to be ready for. It says here, relating to Ireland and places in Ireland, that as with variety of accents, the Pooka has different behaviors according to which county it appears in. In some regions, as long as the Pookas are given due deference with offerings at harvest time, they are respected and seen as helpful, particularly in mountainous and hilly areas. In County Down, the Pooka is known as a short, disfigured goblin who demands a share of the harvest. In County Laois, it is dreadfully feared and is monstrous, while in County Waterford and Wexford, the Pooka appears as an eagle with a huge wingspan. And in Roscommon, it's widely known in legends as a wild black goat. So it's very interesting to see how different people view the same mythological creature. I wonder if there's a story that you have from your area about something that is a little bit different from the common conception of that thing. The next bit of information that I have here is actually from a real person. This is not a mythological creature, but a chieftain. And it's very interesting, the story. And if there's anybody here listening who has read or maybe enjoyed a movie about the creature Dracula, you may or may not know this, but Bram Stoker, the author, is actually an Irish man. And it is said that some scholars believe that Stoker got his ideas for Dracula from Transylvania and Vlad the Impaler, or Vlad the Third. And I did a lot of research on Bram Stoker's Dracula when I was in university. So if you have any questions about that, just come see me. But anyway, there are also other people who believe that Bram Stoker didn't go to Transylvania for this story. He just went to Derry. Now, there was a chieftain named Abhartach. Abhartach was kind of like a really bad chieftain. Like, he would abuse his subjects, and he wanted all the money and all the women and all that stuff. And basically a generally bad dude. And he was also really jealous. So imagine like a power-hungry, money-grabbing, jealous man. He was also really small. His name suggests that he's a dwarf, because that's what Abhartach means, actually. And basically, instead of being like a stand-up guy, really powerful, brave, strong man, he was more like jealous and petty and hated and feared by his people. So one night he suspected that his wife was cheating on him with another guy. So he waited up and, late into the evening, and she had not come to bed. So he went to go spy on her. So in order to do that, he climbed out of the window of his castle and kind of shimmied along the edge there and went to the next room where he believed her to be. And as he's shimmying along the ledge, he fell and just died. He curse blessed, I suppose. He fell and he died. And so his people were pretty relieved that he was now dead, and they went ahead and they buried him, as he was supposed to be, which in those days a chieftain was buried standing upright. You may or may not know that. But then they did the burial, they did the thing, and then the next day they were really shocked because Abhartach was knocking on people's doors and asking for their blood, or more like demanding. And so he was carrying a bowl with him and saying, slit your wrist and put your blood in this bowl. And people were genuinely afraid, obviously. And so it wasn't just the town, the clan that he was from, but all of the neighboring ones as well. So there are many different tales of who came, but basically the idea is that a nice strong warrior decided that he was going to save the people, and he waited for Abhartach to come knocking on the doors again, but he was able to slay Abhartach. And depending on the story, you know, it has different implications for who did the deed, but the idea is that person went ahead and buried Abhartach in the same manner. So he was again standing up in the grave, again, as was befit his station. And you can't, like, the thing about vampires is, we all know this, is that you can kill them, but they'll come back, right? Unless you do it in a certain way. And so the next day he's back demanding more blood from more people. So the second time, the fine warrior gentleman, whoever you choose it to be, went ahead and slew him again. But this time, he went into a further place and buried him again, further away from the town. But the next morning, Abhartach was up and at it again, asking for more blood from more people. So, of course, as you know, I've said it before, if you listen to my videos, that all of the old Irish stories have been changed from their old way into a newer way once Ireland was taken over by Catholicism. So the story then says that he went, this man, this really nice upstanding warrior who wanted to kill the vampire, Abhartach, went to a saint. He went to a Saint Owen. He probably went to probably went to actually a woman, someone who had a vast knowledge of many things. But anyway, I'll keep going with the story as it's told. Owen listened and deliberated on it and prayed on it, of course. And so his advice was, since Abhartach was already dead, he couldn't ever be killed again. The only way to stop him was to pierce his heart with a sword made from the yew tree. Put him in the ground upside down and cover him with ash branches and thorns. When that was done, place a heavy stone slab over the grave, which could never be raised. Otherwise, Abhartach would come up again. And so the brave, fine warrior went ahead and followed the saint's advice. And since Abhartach lies underneath his slab stone. So in Irish, you can actually find this place. It's called Leach Abhartach, or Slaughter Abhartach. Sorry, Luna's coughing. You okay, pet? She's sitting in my lap as I tell the story because she likes to be cuddled. Anyway, if you look up Abhartach, Abartach, you'll be able to find it on a map. It's okay, baby. So, local people are still wary of that site and the stone slab, and as of recently, people have had really bad experiences at that place as well. So if you're looking for a genuine old Irish vampire story, go check it out. Maybe you'll find one. Also, I'd really like to direct you to a video which is all about Abhartach and the story, which is read by an Irishman, and his channel name on YouTube is Hog and Dice, H-O-G, Hog, and Dice, D-I-C-E. I found that his telling of the tale was quite interesting, and if possible, I will try to remember to link it down in the description of this video, or put in the eye, but I'm not sure if I'll remember. Sorry, guys. While my own experiences here in Ireland have been, for the most part, really positive, there is one place and one story that reoccurs every year, and I do not know the name of this place. It is a very, very old house. And basically, I'm trying to recall as much as I can about the place. Essentially, if you imagine that the town is on one side of the river, and the road leading into town follows the mouth of a river. Well, the mouth of the river, it is straddled by the town and then a mountain. So the mountain, we call that area over the water, because you have to cross a bridge to get to it, or you have to go the long way around, all the way around the mouth of the river. And it's like, I don't know, a good 5 kilometers outside the town. To go all the way around to the other side, it'd take 8 or 10 kilometers. So it's very far. Over the water it is. So there is this very old English manor house from the days back when the landlords, they held property and they would hire a lordling to come and mind the area and collect taxes from the peasants. Well, this place, I'm sure it did one day have a name and everything, but I do not recall. I am not local. It was a grand place. They had a manor house, they had a kitchen house, and then they had a wall all the way around the manor, where the crops for that manor would be grown, and the wall was to keep peasants out, you know. So there were certain people who would work on this farm, and then, you know, obviously those peasants actually lived in like slave quarters, basically, or they would live very nearby. So anyway, they had these long, big fields of grain as well, and which would be very, very weird for Ireland. Like, Irish people would not be eating the grain in these parts. They would be eating potatoes and fish. So there was a farmer who lived near this manor house, and the landlord who was minding the place, he would ask very, very difficult things from this farmer. And, you know, it would be to work very long hours, or to stay away from his family, especially around, you know, these times, harvest times. And the story goes that the man would do anything to keep his family alive. But one day, the landlord started to talk about the man's little boy. And it's unclear what the man was saying. And obviously the story changes over time and things like this. But I think that the landlord wanted to recruit this boy. Maybe the boy was 10 years old. And wanted to recruit this boy for work. Because obviously in those days, boys would be made to work at a very young age. And the farmer kept saying, no, he's too young, he's not strong, basically trying to keep the child from having to be forced into labor, to pay for debt, or to, you know, whatever. But anyway, he kept refusing the landlord. And eventually, the landlord got so mad that he wasn't able to use this son in whatever way it was at the time, you know, that he went into the farmer's house and he had the boy stolen, and he brutally hung the boy out on a tree. And this was in the middle of the property as well. Now, the next day, the farmer awoke and the boy wasn't there. But it wasn't too strange. You know, boys sometimes run off to do silly things. And so he went to work. And when he got there, and as he was coming up the long laneway up to the house, he saw that his boy was hanging dead in the tree, in the field. And obviously, he was distraught and very, 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 very angry. And he went on a rampage. And so it is a very interesting story in the way that you can now look at this place and imagine that the destruction of this manor was because of the sheer anger and frustration of the man, the farmer, whose son was killed. But the reality of that story is that at the time, the Irish farmers and peasants who lived in this area were absolutely 100% controlled by British forces, and that it would have been absolutely just awful to have lived in that time, and knowing that the land that was once yours is now someone else's, who doesn't even want to live there, who just wants to own you and your family and your land and profit from it. And so the story, well, it probably is only just a story. It does ring a little bit true. I have heard similar stories being told by my very, very good friend about her family, and that her family only just, within the last 10 years, bought back the lands that were taken from them, from the bank. So those landlords would have sold the land to a bank, and the bank will sell it back to you, but you must buy it back from them. It's a very hot topic, especially down here in the country, and I'm sure that it's also a very hot button topic in other places. And if there are any Irish people listening who would like to chime in on that, feel free to do that in the comment section down below. I know I don't have the whole story, and I'm not going to pretend that I know everything, but I do find it fascinating, and I find it interesting that even the folklore and the stories that I hear, which are very spooky and scary, stem from something that could be actually real, that it could have come from a real story and just been changed for dramatic effect. So that is a local story from my area, and I hope you enjoyed it. Now that is all for the stories of Irish creatures and local myths and things from here. I hope you had a very spooky time. Please catch me this weekend for the Diamond Paint-a-thon, which will be starting in the early hours of Saturday and ending in the late hours of Sunday. To see the entire playlist of the Diamond Paint-a-thon and who's going to be live when, please check out the description of this video. I will have the playlist linked down below. I will be live on Saturday night around my usual time, just a little bit later at 8:15 British Standard Time. That is 3:15 p.m. Eastern Time for all of you Americans watching. I will not be raising money for charity this time, but instead I will be reading spooky stories and then just doing a normal live chat after that. So I hope that you can join me on Saturday night. I look forward to it. It will be a pleasure. And also to join and look at all of the other creators who are going live this weekend as well. Please check them out. If you follow the playlist or save it to your computer, you'll be able to see exactly who is live when it'll show you in the bottom right-hand corner of their thumbnail of their video, which is the little picture that comes up, and it'll say live. If it has a timestamp next to it, it means that that live is over. So I hope you join us. Next week will be the last normal collaboration video that I have with Diamond Art Addiction. And I'm trying to think of exactly what I want to do for next week. If you have any suggestions, please leave it down in the description or in the comment section, of this video. I would love to hear what you have to say and what other kind of interesting topics you would like to hear about. That will be on the 24th of October. And the week following that, I'm very excited that our collaboration will be ending, well, not ending, but these videos around Halloween will be ending on Halloween. So I'm super excited to be with you on Halloween night. So please stay tuned for that. If you aren't subscribed to this channel already, please subscribe. You will get more videos about diamond painting, more videos with stories as well. I love reading to you all so that you can listen to something in the background while you're crafting, whether that be diamond painting, cross-stitching, crocheting, or knitting, anything that you're doing, paper crafts, anything like that. I love reading for you all, and I hope you enjoy the videos. If you do, please give this video a thumbs up. It just shows me that you are watching, because not all the time can we comment, and I understand that. Sometimes we just like to binge watch on our TVs. Now, with that being said, guys, I'm going to go for the day. You know what to do. I will see you all very soon in my next video, and I hope you have a wonderful day. Take care, everybody. Bye.